my name is Briar. Welcome back to my AuthorTube channel. In today's chaos with the animals, there's a cat on this window. There's her tail. There's birds out the window, and this is her enrichment for the day. So I'm not going to move her, and we're just going to work around it. We'll just see what happens. For today's video, I switched up my setup a little bit so that I can have access to the thing that I want to talk about today. Because what I want to discuss in today's video is a tool that I've been using for honestly over a decade, off and on, to help support my creativity, my writing, to make everything that I'm doing more cohesive. And the tool that I'm talking about today is writing notebooks. I was first introduced to writing notebooks actually in my very first creative writing class at university. So over 10 years ago, my teacher told us that we had to have a notebook, and we had to take that notebook with us everywhere. And we would use it to write down anything at all, anything that was inspiring, any ideas that came to us while we were out and about. And we would go on field trips to parks, to markets, to shopping centers. And our task was to fill 1, 2, 3 pages of our writing notebooks. And so I want to show you guys how my practice of keeping a writing notebook started with that university class, and how it's progressed and how it's moved forward. So to do that, I brought out all of my writing notebooks for the past decade or so. Now, something important to remember is I've gone through phases of when I'm using analog writing and when I'm using digital. So honestly, there's not a whole lot of notebooks in this little box. This is one little box, and this is all of my writing notebooks for the past decade. When I started this, it was January 2011 was my first creative writing class in school. So let's take a look at that. So this is my first writer's notebook. It's got my name on it. It's got the writer's notebook on it. It's got random doodles that I would do in class. And this is the one that I had for my very first ever writing notebook. So let's look at page 1. It's got the date, it's got writing prompts, it's got the next day down here at the bottom, and I would keep all kinds of things in here. So let's see if I can show you guys some more of the things that I would put in here. I just put, there's a page of quotes that would get stuck in my head, starting with, let's see, food for thought. Girl Scouts selling cookies is always creepy. This notebook was a class assignment. So I had to show this to my professor and write stuff in it, and just sort of, like, he didn't have to read it, but he had to see that I was filling things out. So I wrote some ideas, I wrote some quotes, things that I would watch a movie. One of my friends drew a really ugly dirt face on it, and just all kinds of things. I made it colorful because I would use a different pen every time I was writing in it, because that's how my brain works. We went on The Price is Right, so there's my Price is Right name tag. That was a really cool experience. I put sticky notes in it, and this was my very first writer's notebook. I would stick random pages that I would write on other things, and I would insert that into my notebook. Something important to note about this initial writer's notebook that I had is it's not finished. There's pages at the end that are completely blank, and I think if you look at the last thing written in here, it's my Chinese classes that I had to take in university. So this is how my writing notebook started. It was just a 50-cent notebook from Staples about that I would write down writing prompts, random quotes from movies that I would hear, ideas for stories. There's not honestly a whole lot in here because I was a baby and I didn't know what I was doing. So let's look at how my writing notebooks evolved. My second writing notebook is from my second creative writing class in college. Wow! I really didn't get the hang of why writing notebooks were a thing, so I just kept it when I was assigned to do so. So this one is, honestly, it's got papers in it. This is a printed copy of somebody's work that I had to write in. This one I stopped just keeping it as inspiration notes and started actually following prompts. So in my previous notebook, I would write down the prompts and then I think I typed them on my computer instead of handwriting anything. In this one, I started keeping more yellow paper. What is that from? I don't know. But in this notebook, I started actually handwriting my stories. I started like following the prompt, and we would do timed writes. And so this one ended up being several pages and more colorful quotes pages from people around me. Any notebook that you have can be a writer's notebook. I started with the Staples notebooks because that's what was easily available to me. As we moved on, as life moved on and I grew as a writer and a person, what I kept my writer's notebook in changed. Once I moved past keeping notebooks for class and started keeping notebooks for me, of course, I moved into something pretty. This was a notebook that I was probably given in high school that had sat on my shelf, and then in the summer after my freshman year or at some point, I picked this up and decided this is going to be my writing notebook. So this one was actually the January of the next year, 2012, where, let's see, this first page is, I just started writing about something that had happened in my day that I was thinking about, ideas of the most influential moments in my life up to that point, quotes, notes, and this is when I started taking my notebook places for me. So I went to a lecture at my college and I wrote down things that inspired me from what I heard. My music history class notes are in here. I have a lot of music history class notes in here. This is all music history. I think I used it as my notebook. I started writing again in 2016 in this same notebook because it was pretty. Let me see if there's a pocket in here. There's nothing in the pocket. So this started my chaos notebook keeping because this became the notebook that I would carry everywhere. It's small enough that it would fit easily into a pocket of a purse or a small backpack that I would take to class. And I would have this and a pencil case in everything. I would take it everywhere. I would write whatever came to mind, whether that was notes for class, assignments, recipes that I wanted to try, quotes that I thought were cool, doodling, character names, anything that came up that I liked or that I wanted to keep went in here. And that's where we go to what became one of my favorite notebooks that I still love to look back on, even though it's probably full of useless things that I'm never actually going to utilize. And that was the notebook that I kept while I was on study abroad. So initially when I was on study abroad, I had a lot of notebooks like this in mind. And I went to study in Shanghai, China for 4 months. And in that time, I discovered that keeping a notebook like this on hand in a large urban city was not gonna do me any favors because then I would have to take a big purse everywhere. It was hard to get into. I would be making myself a target for pickpockets. A lot of my friends lost a lot of their stuff because they were digging in their bag and their phone got taken out of their pocket while they weren't looking. So I knew that having something big like this was not going to be sustainable except going to and from class, because I was on a university campus. So I went to the campus bookstore and I bought 2 little notebooks like this. And if you look into this one, there's going to be papers that fall out. And 2, it's a sketchbook. So I wrote upside down and backwards. V is for, what does that say? V is for vanity. I've got the TARDIS, cherries. I would write up and down in it when I was on a trip. I would write vertically on one side and horizontally on the other. Like, this is probably the most interesting notebook that I have, for the simple fact that it's small. It's a sketchbook. I would keep it in my pocket with a pen, and whatever pen I grabbed that day, I would pull it out of my pocket, open it up like this on the subway, and just scribble a note on my friend's back. And then this is, again, there's nothing in here that's interesting. I just like to look at it because this was a decade ago. Exactly. This was 10 years ago that I was studying abroad in a foreign country, surrounded by people who spoke a language that I didn't understand, even though I'd studied it for 2 years by that point. And I was going places. So this was my writer's notebook. And this is less so about the ideas that I gathered for writing and more so about the memories I have while doing it. So all of my writing notebooks, I can look back on it and remember where I was when I was writing in it. And I think that's really cool. Inspired by that little sketchbook where I would write upside down and sideways, I also bought this in China. You can see in the Chinese in the corner. I got a big sketchbook. And as you can see, this one was not as full. This one I decided was too big. I did not like carrying something of this size. I hadn't carried something of this size since my initial Staples notebooks. So I thought, well, it'll be bigger, it'll be fine, I can carry this around and write in it. No, I didn't write in it. It's got this much. This much of it is full of a couple ideas that I had that I used for, I think, a NaNoWriMo in 2016. But big sketchbook, not so great. Little sketchbook, great idea, fits in a pocket, very nice. So not all of your writing notebooks are going to be successful adventures. After that, I kind of switched to a digital phase in my life. I didn't write in a notebook for several years until I was sort of settling into my life as an adult. I was working as a teacher and I was going out to various cultural events and things that I wanted to experience and remember. So I was actually out shopping, just browsing around, waiting for a musical that I was going to go see with a friend to start. And we wandered into a stationery store. And I found this little notebook. And this became my favorite kind of writing notebook because it's a fairly small size. It's not too big. It'll still fit into a purse quite easily. It's spiral bound, so I can open it all the way up and write on each side. And I don't have to have the space to have a fully open notebook. And it's hard-sided, so it's not going to get destroyed, absolutely destroyed, by tossing it into my purse and pulling it out whenever I have time. And this is the notebook that I was using when I finished my first novel manuscript. So this one is also always going to be special to me. I started it, again, with sticky notes and papers that fall out. My writing notebooks do not go everywhere with me, and therefore they get shoved full of random papers. But this one I started just after my birthday in 2017. And I just purchased it. I was sitting in a cafe. I went to go see a play, so I've got the ticket stub in there. I don't know where these stamps came from. I had stamps that I stamped the date at the top of them. And this became like all the papers are falling out. So this became the notebook that stuck with me. I think it took me, let's see, I started this in February. In April of 2017. If I go to the back, I flipped it over and I started making notes in January of 2018. But those notes, like upside down notes, right side up notes, everything is chaos incarnate. Again, chaos is my life and I love it. Yes, I think I filled this out for a year. It looks like it went through June of 2018. So this little book lasted me about a year. And sometimes it was budgeting notes. Sometimes it was character development. Sometimes it was writing prompts at my writers group where we would take 3 random words and set a timer for 20 minutes and write. And sometimes it was plotting notes. This is based on the plot embryo, I think. I never really fell in love with that method. Sometimes it's work papers that just got shoved into everything. And it's still very colorful. It's still kind of messy and chaotic, and I would write pages and pages of things, and it would just go on, and I loved this notebook. And again, this is a very special notebook for me because I was using it when I finished my first manuscript. This has the very first ideas that I had for my second manuscript, which I was developing those while finishing my first, and that was really the push that I needed because I was like, I really want to write this cool idea, so I have to finish this other idea that I'd already started. And when I ran out of space in this one, I was very sad. I immediately went out to another stationery store and I picked up a book that's very similar. So both of these are, the second book was a little bit bigger all the way around, but again, spiral bound. Oh no. My camera just went black and it was really weird. So as I was saying, after I finished this notebook, I purchased this one. Very cute, little doggy getting hit with a frisbee. It's a little bit bigger, but everything else is the same as the previous one because it really worked for me at that time in my life. So it's spiral bound, it's hardcover, it's completely a mess on the edges, and it's much the same. It's got all of random life things going on inside. It's got sticky notes and papers shoved on in wherever they fit. It's got blank pages that I had marked for purposes and then not used for those purposes. It's got a recipe for cookies. So this one I think was from June, July of 2018, and it lasted me through, I stopped writing the date. Okay, so this one lasted me through November of 2019. So again, about a year and a half. So each of these lasted me about a year and a half, at which point I left the job that I've been working at and moved to be closer to my family. COVID happened very quickly thereafter, and I was in a much less stable period of life, so I thought I would go back to a smaller notebook. So this one is much like my first independent notebook that I ever did, in that it's got the magnetic clasp enclosure. It's very pretty. It's just very pretty. But it's also got my passport photos sticking in it. So it's got random doodles. I discovered that because it's not spiral bound, I didn't like writing on the left-hand side, so I would only write on the right-hand side for the most part. And this one's got so much unwritten in it because, again, small, side-bound, not wire. It's not a good fit for me. So I guess the ultimate takeaway that I want people to have from this video is find what works for you. If something doesn't work that you've tried, you have a pretty notebook that you would like to write in, but it's just not working for you, that's fine, set it aside. So key takeaways for a writer's notebook. Number 1, take it with you everywhere. You can't keep a writer's notebook if you don't have the notebook on your person. Number 2, don't let yourself be constrained by the title of a writer's notebook. You are a writer. This is your notebook. Anything you put inside is therefore meant to go inside a writer's notebook. Whether what's going inside is an idea for a character, or what's going inside is your to-do list that you have to finish before you can even sit down to write. All of those things are important. They need to get out of your head. And if you have paper and a pen around you, you have a place to put it. Number 3, if a notebook isn't working for you, put it aside and get a new one. You don't have to write on every single page. All of my notebooks have blank pages because I didn't finish writing in this when I left my study abroad and came back home. But this is my study abroad notebook. So I didn't want to write more in it once I was back in the United States. So I called it finished. I set it aside. And now it gets to remain my study abroad notebook and not that random chaos notebook like the rest of them. Oh my gosh, I just flashed my passport photos. Anyway, I'm not taking that out, it's fine. And I guess I just want to finish this off by saying whether your writer's notebook is physical, whether it's digital, whether it's started for school or started for you, or mostly empty, honestly. All of that is valid and all of that is useful. You don't need to meet some sort of requirement to have a writer's notebook. Just keep it with you, write in it, and keep going. Just don't stop. So as I like to do, this is my past. These are the writer's notebooks that I've filled since I was a freshman in university. I am 30 years old. I am no longer a student. I am no longer a teacher. I am sort of at a weird place in my life. And I have not kept a writer's notebook for the past 2 years. I'm gonna blame COVID for that one. I've kept notebooks and I've used them similarly, but I've not had a notebook that I thought of as a writer's notebook. So I'm going to be starting for the end of 2022 my new writer's notebook. I found this at a discount store for like $7. Everywhere online they're like double the price, so I'm very excited. It's not spiral bound, so I'm nervous. It is hardcover, but it is this kind of binding on the side from Studio O. I don't know what it's called, I forgot, but if you open it up, it still lays flat. So I'm hopeful that I will like this one more than I liked the softbound books that I've used in the past, or hardbound books that I've used in the past. And I'm excited to get started. So if you have an empty notebook that you like, or you might like, I invite you to get started and share with me, do you keep a writer's notebook? What do you write in it? Do you have a dedicated purpose for it, or is it your chaos? I definitely am always centered on chaos. If I try to give a dedicated purpose to a notebook, I've got one that's dedicated to one of my stories, and it's probably got like 6 pages full in it. It's mostly empty because constraining my ideas like that, trying to put the notebook in a box of this is about my demons novel, then every other idea that I have, I'm gonna have to carry around several notebooks. And that's not for me. I like to have one notebook full of chaos and write from beginning to end. Once I finish it, I pick up a new notebook, fill it with chaos. So what's your style of a writer's notebook? Have you kept one before? What made you start? What made you stop? Do you keep digital notebooks? I've never been able to work with a digital notebook. I like having pens. I like making things colorful and having a giant pencil case that I haul around bigger than the notebook itself. Let me know in the comments and I will be sure to be updating you guys about how this new style of notebook progresses and if I actually manage to keep it up. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next weekend. My aim is for Saturdays, but I may or may not define Saturday as any time before Monday. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Okay, I don't know if you can hear her purring. It's adorable, but it's also a problem. Yeah, it's a problem.